Presenting our podcast, Got Milk, the Indian Dairy Context, brought to you by Shunya Agritech, India's first animal nutrition and well-being focused organization. Say hello to your hosts, Gear and Sahil.
All right, so you want to get right to it, right? You want to know what's going on without wading through mountains of information. We hear you, and that's why we do these deep dives. Today we're tackling something pretty crucial, and that's how a country with as many animals and people as India is figuring out how to feed all that livestock, especially when land and water are becoming, well, more and more valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been digging into some research about this new technology, hydroponic fodder production. It seems like a pretty promising solution, and India's a good case study because they're facing these resource constraints head on. We're going to try to break it all down and see if this tech really lives up to the hype.
Okay, so let's set the scene a little bit. We all know India's population just keeps growing. It's the biggest in the world now, and they also have the biggest livestock population too. That's a lot of animals to feed. Milk, eggs, meat, all these things are essential parts of their food system, and for a lot of people, it's their livelihood. But at the same time, you've got cities expanding, industries needing more space, and all of a sudden, those resources that are essential for everything, land, water, they're in high demand. It's a tough balancing act.
It is, and I think what's really interesting is this competition for resources. You've got a growing population needing food and places to live, and then this massive number of animals also needing to be fed. So making sure those animals get the right nutrition becomes a pretty big challenge when you're dealing with less and less fertile land and available water. And that's where hydroponics comes in. It's a way to grow food without soil, which could be a total game changer when it comes to resource management.
That makes sense. And it seems like that all ties into the idea of making animal production more sustainable. But what does that really look like in practice?
So sustainable animal production is really about creating a system that works long term. It's about meeting the demand for food now in a way that doesn't compromise the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. We got to consider the social and economic aspects, of course, but also the environmental impact. There are some interesting examples of this kind of thinking already happening, like converting cow dung to CNG, or even combining hydroponic fodder systems with solar energy. These are all parts of a bigger movement toward a more balanced system where how we produce and consume is more responsible. We need to look at the whole picture, everything that goes into raising animals, the breed, the feed, how they're cared for, and what comes out the products, and even the waste, and make sure that whole cycle is sustainable.
And from what I was reading, a big part of that sustainability picture is the feed itself. Like, up to 70% of the cost of milk production can just be what farmers spend on feed and fodder. That's huge.
It really is, and it's getting worse, because the gap between the supply and demand for feed and fodder, it's widening. Things like climate change with its crazy weather and the growing human population putting pressure on farmland, that all plays a role. And unfortunately, it's not uncommon for farmers in India to rely on dry fodder that's not very nutritious. That means the animals aren't producing as much as they could, which affects everything down the line. There is more nutritious feed available, but it's often too expensive. So you've got this trade-off between cost and quality that a lot of farmers are struggling with.
Right. And I remember reading that there are environmental downsides to relying on grain-based feed as well. Something about methane, right?
Exactly. Animals digest these grain-based feeds, which are high in protein, and they release methane as a byproduct. Methane is a pretty potent greenhouse gas, so there are climate implications to consider as well. Nutritionists will tell you that the best diet for livestock is about 2/3 fodder. And within that fodder portion, 1/3 should ideally be fresh, green fodder, with the other third coming from concentrated feeds. This green fodder is so important because it provides essential nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants that help keep the animals healthy.
But from what I saw, the amount of land in India that's actually dedicated to growing fodder, it's not much, like 4%, and they're expecting that to decrease even more. And on top of that, they're at the mercy of the rains, which are becoming less and less predictable, creating shortages of green fodder at different times of the year.
It highlights just how complex this issue is. In 2022, India had a green fodder deficit of something like 35%. That's a massive shortage, and projections show it could get even worse by 2050. This lack of quality feed directly affects how much milk or meat the animals can produce, and that drives up prices for everyone. So finding alternative ways to grow feed that don't require so much land or water and are better for the environment, that's becoming more and more critical.
So that brings us to hydroponic fodder. It's being held up as a pretty promising solution. Can you tell us a little bit about how it stacks up against traditional methods?
So what's so exciting about hydroponic fodder is its potential to solve those key problems we were just talking about. It offers a way to produce large amounts of animal feed using much less land and water. It's a lot more efficient and possibly more sustainable. Farmers can use a variety of seeds: maize, ragi, bajra, cowpea, horse gram, sun hemp, jowar, foxtail millet, the list goes on. The specific choice comes down to what grows well in a particular region and what's most affordable for the farmers.
And it seems like this could be particularly beneficial for farmers with smaller plots of land, maybe even women who are often the ones taking care of livestock.
You're absolutely right. Hydroponic fodder is ideal for farmers who don't have a lot of land or maybe don't even own land. It's a perfect solution because it's space efficient and doesn't require a huge investment. For women who often play a central role in managing livestock but might not have the same access to land or resources, this could be a real game changer. Think about the water savings. To grow 1 kilogram of elephant grass, you'd need, say, 60 to 80 liters of water. But with hydroponic fodder, you only need about 3 liters. That's a 95% reduction. It's incredible. And if you look at land use, you can produce 1,000 kilograms of green fodder every single day on a plot of land that's just 480 square feet. Compare that to the 10 to 20 acres you'd need for conventional farming. It's a world of difference.
So can you walk us through how this hydroponic system actually works? Is it complicated?
So at its core, hydroponics is about growing plants in a water solution that's enriched with nutrients, no soil involved. And what's amazing is how quickly the plants grow. Traditional fodder crops can take months to mature, 45 to 60 days, sometimes even longer. But with hydroponics, you can have fodder ready to feed to your animals in just 7 to 8 days. And often, the nutritional content is even higher than what you get from conventionally grown fodder. It works for different types of animals: cows, goats, pigs, chickens, you name it. For poultry, it can be ready in as little as 4 days.
And a big advantage, especially with all the unpredictable weather we've been seeing, is that it doesn't rely on the seasons, right?
Exactly. Hydroponic fodder, you can grow it year-round, rain or shine. Doesn't matter if it's monsoon season or the driest month of the year. You get consistent production. It's incredibly resilient to climate change. And the best part is, farmers can set these systems up right on their property. They don't need a ton of space, and the daily work involved is minimal, maybe an hour or two. It's also mostly organic, no need for those synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. And because the animals eat the whole plant roots, shoots, everything, there's very little waste generated.
So what does this setup actually look like? Is it expensive to put one of these systems together?
Not at all, really. A lot of farmers use pretty simple structures, maybe bamboo or iron frames, to hold these trays that are slightly tilted. The trays have holes for drainage, and that's where the seeds are placed. They sprout and grow right on those trays. The grass can reach a height of 20 to 30 centimeters in just a week. The key things to keep in mind are using good quality seeds, making sure the system is protected from direct sunlight, that there's good air circulation, and that water drains properly. That last part is important to prevent fungal growth.
So for a farmer who wants to grow, let's say, maize fodder hydroponically, what are the steps involved?
Okay, so you start with good quality maize seeds. The moisture content should be low, ideally less than 12%. The first step is to wash the seeds thoroughly to remove any dirt or debris. Then you soak them in clean water for about a day. Once they've been soaked, you move them to a warm, dark place for about 30 hours so they can start to germinate. After that, they're ready to go on the trays. You spread them out evenly, and then you have to keep them moist. You sprinkle them with water every few hours, just a quick spray, and in about 7 days, you've got fresh maize fodder ready to harvest. From just 1 kilogram of maize seed, you can get around 6 kilograms of fodder.
Wow, so the output is significantly higher. What about the impact on the animals? What kind of benefits do farmers see when they start feeding their livestock hydroponic fodder?
A lot of farmers report seeing positive changes. They say their animals' digestion improves. Milk production often goes up, and the quality of the milk is better too. In poultry, egg production increases. Overall, the animals seem to be healthier, they have better immunity, and even fertility seems to improve. And because the whole process is relatively simple and doesn't require specialized knowledge, it saves farmers time and energy. They're only spending an hour or two a day on maintenance, which frees them up to focus on other things.
Speaking of focusing on other things, what about the economic side of this? I saw some numbers that compared the production cost to traditional fodder. How does it measure up?
The research we looked at said that the cost of producing hydroponic maize fodder is around 5 rupees per kilogram. That is higher than traditional maize fodder, which is around 3 rupees per kilogram. But there are some important things to factor in. First, hydroponically grown fodder tends to be more nutritious, So animals might not need to eat as much to get the same nutritional benefits that could potentially bring down overall feed costs. Second, animals really like eating it. It's very palatable, and it's free from any toxins, which is a bonus. For women who are managing livestock, this could mean more income, more profit. It could mean better nutrition for their families because their animals are healthier and more productive. And because this can often be done at home, it frees up their time and gives them more control over their resources.
But like with any new technology, I'm sure there are some drawbacks. What are some of the challenges that come with hydroponic fodder production?
Definitely. One thing is that you need to create a pretty specific environment for the plants to thrive. The ideal temperature is around 19 to 22 degrees Celsius. Humidity needs to be around 60%. And you need to provide light around 2000 lux for 12 to 16 hours every day. And good air circulation is crucial. Now, maintaining all these conditions consistently, that can be a challenge, especially because India has such diverse climates. These variations can lead to inconsistent fodder yields, which is a concern for farmers.
I also read about problems with fungal contamination.
That's right. Because hydroponic systems are always moist, there's a risk of fungal growth. The spores are naturally present on the seeds, and that humidity creates a perfect environment for them to grow. Farmers can address this by doing some simple things. Using light bulbs and shade nets can help regulate the temperature and humidity. And treating the seeds with an antifungal solution before you start can also help. Another big challenge is the availability of good quality seeds that are suited for hydroponics. Current estimates say that only about 15 to 20% of the needed seed quantity is available in India. Increasing seed production and making sure farmers can easily access quality seeds locally, that's a big hurdle to overcome. Especially because seeds can be a pretty big expense, sometimes making up as much as 90% of the total production cost.
So given those challenges, is it still economically feasible for farmers to make the switch to hydroponic fodder?
Well, the research we looked at did a cost analysis for a relatively small setup, about 6 square feet per month. They didn't include labor costs, but they estimated that the maize seeds would cost around 3,600 rupees for 120 kilograms. Cleaning supplies would be another 200 rupees, bringing the total monthly cost to 3,800 rupees. But from that 120 kilograms of seed, you could get about 600 kilograms of fodder. If they sell that fodder for 8 rupees per kilogram, that's a total revenue of 4,800 rupees. That gives them a benefit-cost ratio of 1.26. So despite the challenges, it does seem to be a worthwhile investment.
That's good to hear. So just to wrap things up, what are the main takeaways about hydroponic fodder in India?
Well, India's facing a lot of challenges: natural disasters, land scarcity, climate change. All these things affect livestock and fodder production. Traditional farming methods are struggling to keep up, so we might be headed for a major fodder crisis in a not-too-distant future. Hydroponic fodder offers a way out. It's more sustainable, uses fewer resources, and can handle the pressures of a changing climate. But we need to adapt and refine these systems so they work across India's diverse climates. And more research is needed to see how well the plants do in these systems and how it impacts the health and productivity of the animals. At the end of the day, having good quality feed and fodder isn't just about animal health. It's about human health too. It's about making sure everyone has access to nutritious food, and that's becoming increasingly important as the climate changes.
That's a great point. It seems like hydroponic fodder production is this interesting intersection of agricultural innovation and the growing need for sustainable solutions. We talked about the potential benefits, less resource use, improved animal welfare, economic opportunities, particularly for smallholder farmers. And we discussed the challenges too, things like maintaining the right growing conditions and getting good quality seeds.
And that brings up a thought-provoking question. If water scarcity is becoming a problem, not just in India, but globally, could hydroponic fodder production be a solution for animal agriculture in other parts of the world? What would need to change? How could we adapt this technology to make it work in different climates, different farming systems? It really makes you think about how these types of innovations could play a role in achieving food security and sustainable agriculture on a much larger scale.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of Got Milk, the Indian Dairy Context. Subscribe to the podcast. And a reminder, this episode was brought to you by Shunya Agritech, India's first animal nutrition and well-being focused organization. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.